Hello, welcome to the This Is Not Therapy Hour. I am Brandon Tessers. I am a licensed therapist, but this is not therapy for very, very many reasons. This is just a live stream, it's just an open conversation. It's me and you guys. And some of you, hopefully, will be in the chat and actually writing things to me so that I know at least a little bit about who you guys are and what you're wanting to talk about or looking for, what might be helpful. And the rest of you guys, I'm just imagining. And probably what I'm imagining doesn't really match with who you are exactly, but hopefully there's enough overlap that it's useful anyway. Um, I run a therapy and executive functioning coaching practice, two separate things called Affective Artistry. Our logo is up there in the corner. We do therapy in the state of Illinois with people who are in the state of Illinois. Good old therapy. I don't know what term I'm looking for. The laws for the therapy industry are outdated. And one of the more annoying and funny ones is that it licensure is state by state in the United States, and licensure in a particular state allows you to work with a client who is physically located in that state at the time of the session. So if a client of mine is out of town for a couple of weeks, we can't meet until they come back into town. It's not relevant to what we're talking about today, but just we do therapy with people who are in the state of Illinois. We have executive functioning coaches who work with people all over the world. And yeah, we always pick a topic to start off so that we don't have just like dead air or people feeling pressure to have to put things out. But we'll go in whatever direction we go in, just like any conversation. That what you guys say, what you ask, I'm paying attention. It impacts me, and we'll follow wherever the conversation goes. If you do write in the chat, and I appreciate it whenever anybody does, just know that if you're watching this on Facebook, that it will be listed under your Facebook account. Whatever you put in the chat will say the name from your Facebook account and then the chat. If you're on YouTube watching this, then it will be your Google account. And if you're on Twitch, it'll be your Twitch account. So keep that in mind. And this will be saved as a video on demand so people can watch it later on, including the comments that are put on there, which, I want more comments. I don't know why I would say things that make it sound much scarier than it is, but I guess it's just important to me to know that you guys know what this is. I would absolutely hate for someone to put a comment on there not realizing that their name would be attached to it or not realizing that the video will be, kept up. I think that's mostly the logistical stuff. Today, Margaret, who is one of our staff therapists here, and she was on the stream a few weeks ago with me, has been doing a great job of running a TikTok account for Affective Artistry, which I very much appreciate because it's not something that I know how to do or have much interest or the resources in figuring out how to do it. So she's doing a good job of collecting information and looking at what kinds of things people are wanting to talk about and getting questions and all that. So she suggested today to talk about seasonal depression, and that's what we're going to talk about starting off. But again, we'll go wherever things go. I do want to acknowledge today too, because this is part of, I think, being authentic. What I am trying to do here is to give an authentic idea of who I am and what this work is, not to try and convince anyone or advise anyone, just to be visible and show things. And one of the things that I believe in this work is authenticity, which means to me two things. Number one, that everything a person communicates, they communicate to the best of their ability as accurately as possible. So as opposed to saying be honest, because there's all kinds of questions and loopholes in honesty. It's I'm doing my best to utilize the language that I know. Of all the language I know, I'm using the pieces of it that I think are most likely to accurately relay what it is I'm trying to get across. The other element of authenticity is putting out there anything that you think the other person might find interesting or relevant. So if I have a thought that, well, here's an example that, let me close that. can't close that. So hopefully it doesn't make that little bing bong noise too much anymore. That I could respond to anything, right? Like in any given moment, anybody in any given moment, there's so many things that you know, so many things that you think, so many things that you might want to express or not express. How do you select among them? And to me, it's about relevance. It's whomever it is that I'm communicating with. I want to do my best, and we fail all the time, but I still want to do my best to make an assessment of all the things that I could authentically say right now, which seems the most relevant or of the most interest to the other person. And we're making guesses, but I'm not holding things back that I think other people might find interesting or important or that they might be wondering about. If I think you might be wondering about it, I'm going to try and address that and get it out there. Of course, again, wrong all the time. So anyway, in that spirit of authenticity, I'm in a bad mood today. It's been a rough, 14 hours or so, rough night, rough morning, just lots of things changing around. And I'm putting this out there right now because I'm positive, especially with the kinds of people that tend to gravitate towards this work and this stream. We tend to be sensitive to social data, tend to be perceptive and pick up on things from people. So I am conscious, I'm aware of the fact that my mannerisms are different than they normally are. But even if I wasn't aware of it, I would assume that there are changes in the ways that I am comporting myself, non-verbally, verbally, word choice, tone, everything. I would assume that there are things that are different, even if I don't know what they are or can't tell. And that can give a sense of distress to somebody else, to say something's off, something's different, but nobody's acknowledging the fact that it is different. And I'm not sure if I'm allowed to ask about it. And now I'm going to make guesses about it, and et cetera, et cetera. And yes, a lot of this work generally is me relying on my own experiences in order to come up with what I think might be helpful to offer to other people. So yeah, I'm projecting for sure, because that bothers me. It really causes me distress to have somebody sitting in front of me and to be able to tell that something is wrong, something is off. They're not how they usually are. They seem upset or as though they're experiencing some kind of negative emotion, and I don't know what it is. I hate that. I especially hate it when I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it, to mention, hey, are you okay? And they said, no, I'm fine. Am I supposed to push again or not? Neurodivergent communication and norms and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I'm in kind of a crappy mood right now, which I think will get better over the course of this stream, because that's been the case in the past. Because doing this work, just doing the work that I do generally, it pulls my focus. Whatever it is that's bothering me, whatever it is, not always in a good way too, right? Like, yes, I'm talking right now about if something's on my mind that I'm pissed about, that once I start working, I don't have the space to continue to hold that anymore. It just has to fall away. And sometimes I pick it back up again after work, but a lot of the time, like right now, there's nothing I need to pick back up again. It's not about like ongoing problems that need to be addressed. It's just a series of things that happen that were really annoying and irritating. And so once I'm able to let go of it and move on, I have no reason to go back to it. Causes problems sometimes when the other things that I'm supposed to be thinking about or am thinking about that I lose track of are like good or important things or things that people need from me. And then I do mess that stuff up all the time. So anyway, just wanted to explain that. Not necessarily relevant to what we're discussing, although I'm always open to all questions. I don't want to answer that as also an authentic response, because I don't want anyone to have to go through the mental effort of deciding whether it's okay to ask a question or not. It's always okay to ask any question for me. You can ask me anything you want to ask me at any point. And if I don't want to answer it, I'll tell you I don't want to answer it, but it doesn't mean that I'll be upset that you asked or judge or critique or any of that stuff. I believe that people ask questions because they're interested in the information that they're asking for. Obviously, there's rhetorical questions, which is a separate thing, but I have no problem with people being interested in whatever information they're interested in. I don't feel an obligation to have to give any information anyone asks, although frankly, I'm a pretty open book. There's not that many things that I wouldn't want to answer. Yeah, okay. Maybe I'll be a little more scattered, especially at the beginning, because I am in a bad mood. And I'm going for it anyway. So, seasonal depression. I'm assuming this is coming up. I don't have a lot of the details of what Margaret's seeing or why this is the topic, but I'm assuming this is coming up because it is a huge transition right now, at least in America. I'm sure in many, many other countries as well, but America is where I've lived my whole life, so it's what I know. So I don't want to make any assumptions. The end of summer, beginning of fall is a big transition, and it's a transition that can definitely cause problems, definitely can bring up well, we'll just say can bring up feelings of depression or anxiety or any kind of negative feelings for people. And it's not all about weather, and it's not all about ultraviolet light. So I'll say off the top that seasonal affective disorder is not something I am an expert in by any means from my very limited knowledge of seasonal affective disorder. I believe that there's research that looks at that it has to do with actual like the biological effects of getting more or less ultraviolet light and how that interacts with vitamin D. I think that's the case, but I don't know. And I do know that the things that are in my expertise often get talked about by other people who are not experts on it as though it is a purely biological mechanism when it isn't. So that's why I'm being hesitant to say, I'm not going to say definitively that that's what it is, but from my knowledge of it, there is an actual like biological, mechanical, at least element having to do with exposure to ultraviolet light and vitamin D. And I'm not going to talk that much about that stuff because biology is not my specialty. I just want to put that out there that I'm going to be talking today about seasonal depression, not seasonal affective disorder specifically. And there's a bunch of overlap, but I don't want anybody to take, this is very inconvenient. Sorry, everyone, one moment. We had a logistical issue this morning with on the business side of things, nothing to do with the kind of things we're talking about here, that just needs to be resolved. And I was in a support chat resolving it, and I thought it was resolved, and now they're asking me more questions. So I just let them know that I won't be able to respond to that anymore. So biology, always a factor to keep an eye on, that the levels of various vitamins, chemicals, different things in your body, in your bloodstream, in your, that stuff impacts you. Absolutely. I don't generally want people to go down the path of thinking that that's the only factor that matters, because it's not, at least not in the kinds of things that we are talking about, right? That there are definitely and obviously medical conditions that there's no element of what you think or changing the systems in your life or blah, blah, blah is going to do anything about it. It's just a biological issue. It needs to be handled that way. Mental health is not that. It has an element of that biology impacts the way that people think and feel and behave. Absolutely. It is not the only thing, because even if, for example, someone is experiencing depression that we could say is entirely due to biology, that there are no other important factors, well, that person still doesn't feel depressed in the same way every moment. It fluctuates. It gets better and worse. It gets different. And some of those differences are preferable and some. So things change, which means there are other things that impact it as well. And we always want to look at what those other things are through this paradigm. Because looking at just the biology, well, that's where you're going to look at working with a medical doctor, particularly a psychiatrist, or things like even dietitians or, whatever. And I want to be clear, I don't mean in like dietitians to lose weight. I mean in healthy, balanced diet, make sure you're getting the right vitamins and minerals and whatever. That stuff does matter. That's just not what we're going to talk about. So from our angle, seasonal depression, we're not going to focus on the UV light. I guess I'll say real quick that many people find benefit in using light boxes, which are little UV light producing desk lamps almost, to get extra UV light. And that I take vitamin D supplements, especially in the winter. I live in the northern suburbs of Chicago, so get a lot less sunlight in the winter. So there's stuff like that. But that I would always talk with a doctor or talk with someone who knows that kind of stuff better. We're going to focus on the other side. So seasonal depression, things change. And sometimes things change in patterns that are relatively reliably predictable. Going from summer into fall and summer into fall, then causing more distress, that's a reliably predictable thing. What am I going to say? I was going to go off on a tangent again. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to focus on this. A little scattered today. There's reasons for that. If you live in the kind of climate like I live, where winter and summer are very significantly different, right? That in the summer where I live, the sun doesn't go down until like 9 p.m. In the winter, the sun's down before 5 p.m. before I head home from the office. It's a major difference. But it's also, summer is not only like metaphorically and symbolically linked to freedom in America, it's very realistically linked to freedom because of the school system. Even if you are not a student, the structure, the ebb and flow of the culture and the life in this country is based around the idea that summer is when people are going to be traveling the most, that's when tourism dollars get spent the most, that's when big events are going to happen the most, and winter is when things are going to be happening the least, because huge chunks of people are less available from about September until about May. So things change for very real reasons. I'm pointing that out because I want to be clear. This isn't just about like, oh, I'm bummed because the weather's colder. Yeah, that is a bummer. If there are things that you like to do that require that the weather not be whatever winter weather or fall weather, then there's nothing to do about that. It's going to be disappointing. I guess I shouldn't say there's nothing. There are many things that you can do indoors or travel to, things like that, but you can't do a warm weather activity in cold weather. So we tend to go through this cycle of, I'm going to start in the summer because that's what we're talking about. Summer in this country tends to be freedom and fun and people getting together, large events. That's when people are meeting new people often. Fall then starts to be prepping for winter. That's part of the reason that right now, and again, this is an assumption of why this is coming up a lot for people, is that even though we're still technically in summer, it hasn't technically shifted to fall yet, people are already starting to, because we're looking forward. September in the school year often is like let's get settled in and start to get ready for the rest. And then the grind really starts to hit at the end of September, beginning of October. So a lot of it is preparation. And people are looking forward, not looking forward as in excited for, looking forward as in projecting into the future. Looking at, okay, pretty soon here, it's going to be dark and it's going to be cold and I'm going to be trapped inside and people aren't going to be traveling as much. If you have children or if you yourself are in school or if you work in the school system or in any kind of a field that is school system adjacent, which therapy absolutely is. School system adjacent, I just mean that the school schedule definitely dictates things in the therapy industry as well. For example, there's a book that I have never read called August, entirely about the fact that nobody goes to therapy in August. And of course, that's an exaggeration, but it is a noticeable pattern across the industry that August is a very slow time. We see a lot of people starting to come in looking for help in October, and then again, February, March, what my wife likes to disparagingly refer to as Marchuary. Very dreary time here in the Chicago area. And we see less people coming in over the summer. Part of that is busy. Part of that is There are things that all of us do to manage our emotional state, right? I don't like the term mental health. I think it's problematic. So I try and stay away from it where I can, but of course use it to the extent that it is a common phrase that means things to people. We are all doing this constantly. In fact, maybe we could talk a little bit about some systems approach here. There's a term. Let's talk systems. There's a term, cybernetics. A cybernetic system is a system that can monitor itself and make adjustments to itself in order to maintain equilibrium. And that process is a process that we call homeostasis. So equilibrium is the state at which everything is indefinitely sustainable. When a system is in equilibrium, it means it can continue to function as long as nothing changes. It could function this way forever. It's not depleting itself. It's not escalating or de-escalating. It's solid. Then things disrupt systems, sometimes from the outside, sometimes from the inside, but context changes, things change, and the situation, the context, the way of being that was keeping things in equilibrium, that was equilibrium, is no longer sustainable. It starts to become draining or escalating or whatever other thing. And if a system can monitor itself and make adjustments to itself, it's making adjustments to itself in order to get back to equilibrium. So the classic example here is a thermostat. The thermostat in your house it has three important pieces. It has an input where you can say what temperature you want the house to be. It has a thermometer, so it can measure what temperature it currently is in the location where the thermostat is. And it has the ability to turn on and off, to manage your HVAC system, your heating, and if you have central air conditioning, your air conditioning. So say I tell my thermostat, I want it to be 72 degrees in here. Well, the thermometer inside of the thermostat is saying, okay, it's 72 degrees. We don't need to do anything. And then if the temperature starts to drop 71 degrees, 70 degrees, 69 degrees, okay, let's kick on the heat. And it sends a signal to the heating to turn on so that everything starts to warm up. And then it goes up to 70, 71, 72, 73, 70. Oh, stop the heating. We went too far. And it goes back down. And then it starts to fall again and it turns back on to get it back up. This is why your heat and air kicks on and kicks off, except in extreme circumstances where it has to stay on the whole time. You are a cybernetic system. People are cybernetic systems, as well as any grouping of people that interacts with each other in an ongoing way. Meaning you monitor yourself. That's what consciousness is. In executive functioning terms, we would talk about metacognition, self-awareness, the ability to recognize your state. That's partly the subjective internal state that you're experiencing. That's where we're talking about mental health and things like that. But it's also your biological, your physical state. You notice when you're hungry, and that leads you then to go get some food and eat food so that the hunger ceases. So a lot of these signals, in fact, we could probably say, well, signals get developed and crossed up and mixed up and whatever. But as a basis, every human being's signals are designed around persistence. That what your brain and body is designed to do is to persist, to keep itself functioning, to stay alive, to maintain the status quo. Whenever something happens that causes you some negative experience, whether that's physical pain, whether that's emotional distress, it is a signal that something is changing within that system. Something needs to be addressed. Something is going wrong and needs to be changed in order to maintain that equilibrium. Remember, this whole process is called homeostasis, the process of monitoring your state and then making adjustments in response to changing conditions to maintain equilibrium. I don't know why I'm emphasizing that. I guess people often confuse homeostasis with equilibrium. They think homeostasis is that stable point, but it's the process. I don't know why that matters so much. just totally blanked out. I need to put I'm scattered today. Didn't get a lot of good sleep last night, which affects my system, right? Actually, that's a very common example. You're tired. Tired is a negative experience. You don't like it. When I say negative experience, what I mean is anything that you're experiencing that contains within it a desire to stop experiencing that thing. So pain could more or less be defined just as a signal that is drawing your attention and that you want to stop having be present. We could say the same about at least certain types of emotional distress. And when we find there's utility in refining those things, the difference between an ache versus a stabbing pain, because it helps us to make decisions and determinations about what might be going on and how to address it, right? I can have a pain or discomfort in this, stomach area of my body. If it feels a certain way, it's hunger and I need to eat. If it feels a slightly different way, it's maybe nerves. If it feels a different way, maybe it's the need to use the bathroom or whatever. So we get specific details. For neurodivergent people, alexithymia, which is more common than it is among the general population, gets involved here. But that's not unrelated, but let me try and keep myself on topic here. So the changes that affect your system can be anything from, like we're talking about, hunger, which means within the system it is utilizing the stores of fuel that, to oversimplify, you're giving fuel. Your body and your brain need certain things to be able to activate. The structure is there, but it needs other things from the external sources to be able to utilize that structure in the way that it's intended to be utilized. So we need to consume those things in whatever way. And then we utilize those systems and that fuel gets consumed, which A, depletes our resources. So we need to then go get more of that. And B, produces waste products, which means that there are things that actually get in the way of further functioning. In other words, you can't just eat and then eat more and then eat more and then eat more, because the waste byproducts of the process of using the calories and vitamins and all the things in food take up space and they need to be evacuated. And we know how that works for the digestive system. And if you don't, we're not going to talk about it here on this stream right now. One thing I think is important to note is that that's not the only kind of waste byproduct that needs to be eliminated. Meaning, you've probably heard something like lactic acid builds up in the muscles when you're working out or working them strenuously. So lactic acid, again, not a biologist, so I could be getting some of the details here wrong, but lactic acid, I'm calling it a waste byproduct. I don't know if it's actually waste or not, but it definitely results as the process of utilizing those muscles, taking fuel to activate the system of that musculature. There's stuff left over at the end, and lactic acid is one of those things. And as the lactic acid builds up in a muscle, you feel that muscle differently. It becomes fatigued, it becomes achy. And now the sensation of fatigue is a signal that, I was pausing because there's different schools of thought on this and I wanted to navigate that, but I'll just say what the different schools of thought are, because where we're going, just to be clear here, is we're going to be talking about cognition as a system like this, because it is. So one school of thought is that the sensation of fatigue, tiredness, soreness, whatever, is a signal that your brain is generating for itself or sending to your consciousness or whatever, to indicate that it would be optimal for you to shift to some other way of doing things. That whatever it was that you've been doing is becoming less and less efficient over time. And therefore, if there is any other way to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, let's shift to another way, attempting another way. I've confused myself because I don't think there's different schools of thought on the muscles. Let's talk about the brain. It is something that I know, everybody who has a brain knows, when you use cognition, when you focus and utilize a lot of cognitive effort, you get fatigued by that. It becomes more and more difficult as time goes on. So there's been a debate, there still is a debate about what that sense of fatigue is. Is it like in the muscles that there is something being depleted or that there is something being damaged and that further use risks injury, and therefore the sense of fatigue is a warning sign of, hey, you have to stop using this or it will break something. The other school of thought is that thinking about a thing has diminishing returns. The longer you continue to focus on or think about the same thing, the less you get out of the second hour than you did out of the first, and you get less out of the third than you get out of the second. So at a certain point, not at a certain point. So as you continue to go down and becomes more and more inefficient, that the brain then is suggesting that you try other routes, and that signal of suggesting that you try other routes is interpreted as fatigue. The major difference here, because maybe that sounds too nuanced to really make, the major difference is one school of thought is saying as you use a system, it becomes less capable of further use until it is had an opportunity to recover in whatever way. The other is saying, no, that system works just fine. It's just that your brain thinks it would be more optimal to try some other thing. But if you make yourself continue to do it, it will continue to operate just fine without any injury. It will get harder to make yourself do that, but doing it doesn't risk any negative effects. Those are the schools of thought. And there's evidence on both sides. I come down very clearly, and I want to be very clear about this on the first, that when you think, it causes a process. No, thinking is a process. We're observing it in one particular way through our conscious experience of it, but biological things are happening. It's just a different lens through which you can observe that process. There is electricity going throughout your brain. Glucose is being broken down into its component elements, and some of those are being consumed and blah, blah, blah. Again, biology is not my specialty. There's some really interesting research that just very recently came out, and of course the headlines are making it out to be much more definitive than it really is, and I would love for it to be very definitive. That basically says, think of it this way. Every moment you spend thinking, and the more intense the thinking, the more this happens, the more quickly this happens, that as you think, waste products, toxins build up in your brain, and those toxins must be flushed out. And until those toxins are flushed out, they do impede the ability of the brain to function, literally, physically, for electrical signals to transfer from one neuron to the next, right? And that the primary way of flushing those things out is sleep. It's not the only thing, but the biggest thing. And some other day we should talk about sleep, because sleep is fascinating. Because we don't know what the different phases do. We have theories, but we don't actually know. Anyway. So long story short, you use your brain, your brain is less capable, moment to moment. Just like if you curl a weight, the second time is a little bit harder than the first, and the third time is a little bit harder than the second, until eventually you just can't do it anymore. Once you are able to rest and recover, you'll be able to do it again. And you can by hitting a certain window of overuse, like a narrow band of I'm doing more than is sustainable, but not so much that I injure myself. And combine that with proper rest and recovery in between those instances of overuse, you can change the system so that it becomes more capable of doing more things. This is what working out is, right? You lift weights that are more than your body can lift sustainably, because you are trying to damage your muscles just ever so slightly. Not too much and get injured, but also not staying within your easy capacity. You do that over time with appropriate rest and care and recovery in between, the muscle gets stronger. Demonstrably, that happens with the brain. Like we know that, right? The more you think about a thing, especially over time, the more you learn a thing, engage with a thing, the easier it gets to do that thing more and to a higher or faster or more efficient extent. What we can't know for sure, or at least don't know for sure, is whether that's because the brain is becoming like building up endurance in some, like if I use my bicep to curl a weight, well, whatever changes result from that are going to impact anything for which I use my bicep. It's not just about that weight. With the brain, we're not as sure about that. Can we do things that increase your overall cognitive endurance? Maybe. We certainly have an experience of things get easier or you can do things for longer. It could also be that because of the nature of cognition, that as you're engaging with a thing, you're getting more efficient at that thing. So that it's not that the resources or the extent to which you can push yourself is increasing. It's just that you can accomplish more within that constraint. I'm getting off on a whole thing. So back to seasonal depression. If you are starting to feel sad, there's a reason for it. And yes, that could be a biological thing, or at least to some extent could be a biological thing where your body is saying, hey, we need more vitamin D. Again, I don't know why I feel the need to clarify these little nuanced pieces that I feel silly afterwards because nobody would care, I think, about the specific details other than me, but I still feel the need to do it anyway. I think it's more useful to think of all of this stuff not as signals that something needs to change, but as the result of damage from things existing as they are. So rather than everything's fine, but hey, we should make some changes. If you don't, you'll be okay, but we should make some changes, which I think is a very problematic idea, that it's just a signal trying to get you to do something that you don't actually need to do. I think it's much more useful to think of it as current context, circumstances, the things that have been happening, the things that I've been doing have caused some damage. And my experience of fatigue or depression or sadness is a result of that damage, of some system is working less optimally than it usually does, or less efficiently than it usually does. So it's not a warning of something that's about to happen. It's as things start to happen, you feel it. And as things continue and things get worse, you feel it more and more. Practical effect is the same. You feel that feeling, it means there's something going on that needs to be addressed. It's not sustainable. Discomfort, pain, emotional distress, sadness, anger, all of these things, anything that the inherent experience of it is unpleasant and you want it to change, is a sign of something needing to change. Because remember, the brain is a cognitive miser. It does not spend resources unless it has a reason to do so. Well, the reason to do so is always one of those signals. What is causing that, what's causing me the pain might change, but it's always pain that tells me I need to change something, if we're talking just about the physical side of things. Discomfort here, we're just talking about is pain. Discomfort and pain are the same thing, just at a certain point you cross a threshold, an arbitrary threshold, and start calling it pain instead of discomfort. If you're starting to feel sad as the seasons change, there's reasons for that. It could be about you ultraviolet light or vitamin D to some extent. It could also be about that maybe the way that you live your life, not by choice, and maybe you don't have that much of an ability to change anything. So this isn't about you're doing it to yourself, but maybe the way that your life is from fall to spring is not sustainable. Because again, we've built this whole cycle that we all participate in to some extent of, okay, we need to push ourselves and work really hard and then take a big break. Push ourselves, work really hard, then take a big break, which is fine. That's how it works, right? You wake up, you go about your day, you go to sleep. You exert effort, then you rest and recover. But how long do we stretch those things out, right? Because what we're aiming for is, if I am doing something that isn't sustainable indefinitely, I need to know why I'm doing it so that I can make so I can make an evaluation of how long I'm going to need to do this. If something isn't sustainable, it means as time goes on, things are getting worse. And particularly with academics and occupations, going to school and going to work, the cycle that we go for is, in this country, the cycle that is pushed for people is push yourself, push yourself, push yourself, push yourself, push yourself. Hey, you're about to break. Take a break before your body and brain make you take a break. Recover and fit as much rest and recovery as you can into as short of a window of time as possible, then come back and do the same thing. Not that vacations wouldn't always be necessary or enjoyable or whatever, but the structure of our life depends on that, which is just another way of socioeconomic status dictating so many things. Because taking a break, taking a vacation, it's one thing to just not have to do the things that normally you have to do. That's better. But it's even more to do other things you don't normally do that make that time even more recuperative than otherwise. There's a reason that if you can afford it, people who can afford it travel places and get massages and go out for nice meals and whatever. There are things that you can access with those resources that make it easier to recover. Very quick side note, I won't do the whole thing. The reason we have summer break in this country is because originally there wasn't air conditioning, and the rich people had country estates. In England, they refer to it as the country estate. In the Midwest of America, it's the lake house. The city is hot and crowded and dusty and terrible to be in over the summer. So if you have the money, you have a nice place up in the woods where it's relaxing and cool and enjoyable. And when the rich people left over the summer, they wanted school to pause so that their kids don't miss out on anything till they come back. That's why we have it. It's not as beneficial for some as it is for others. And I'm really not talking about seasonal depression much today. For some people, summer break is worse. There are many people, many children in the city of Chicago, as an example, but all over the place, who get their food primarily from school, their breakfast and lunch at school. And over the summer, their food source becomes less reliable. They have less secure access to food. I don't want to go down that whole path right now. Seasonal depression. Things happen in cycles. You may have heard a very common thing, that the anniversary of significant events matters. That if you have a significant experience of trauma, it is worth watching out at that same time the next year, whether you might experience something more difficult, where things get worse. That there are people who are very energetic and enthusiastic at one part of the year, and then very low energy and holed up in their abode at another part of the year with predictability. I'm doing the best I can to try and be clear about the fact that biology is an important factor in this, but not the only thing, because too often that becomes a scapegoat. Why am I struggling? Oh, because seasonal affective disorder, which, is true. Because seasonal affective disorder, like all these disorders, is a construct that we use to name and label and interact with a certain set of experiences. So it's true because by definition, that's what it is. But what do you do about it? If you think that it's seasonal affective disorder and the only thing to do about that is a light box and vitamin D, then that's all you're going to do. And that might be enough. It might change things for you so that things get better and things can start cycling in the right direction. Called cycling down, back to that systems analysis. What will sometimes happen, and is often relevant in therapeutic processes, what will sometimes happen is that something within the system, within the process of homeostasis, gets messed up. Sometimes because of changes outside, sometimes not. Where our thermostat example, imagine a thermostat where for whatever reason wires got crossed, and every time it attempts to send a signal to the air conditioning to turn the air conditioning on, it's actually controlling the heat. And every time it's trying to send a signal to the heat, it's actually controlling the air conditioning. In that case, being a cybernetic system causes problems. We call it cycling up, which means, okay, if it's set at 72 degrees and now it's 73, 74, okay, it sends a signal to turn on the air conditioning, but instead of turning on the air conditioning, it actually turns on the heat. Well, now not only is it going to be going up because it's failing to mitigate the environmental change, it's actually accentuating it. It's making it hotter faster. Well, now it's 76 degrees. We really better bump up that AC, which means we're actually turning the heat up so it gets even hotter, even faster, and it tries to turn up the AC and it gets worse and worse and worse. That's cycling up. Cycling down is when the problem is discovered and rectified, and now it can kick on the AC and it starts coming back down. It doesn't solve right away, but it starts going back toward equilibrium. In humans, we call these things maladaptive solutions. When you're presented with a problem and in response to that problem, you do something, you enact something that actually makes the problem worse. But because you, your brain, your body, or you consciously, whatever, think that it's actually a solution, well, now that the problem's worse, you try the solution harder, which makes the problem worse faster, and so on and so on. And we want to find the root of that so that we can start it cycling down. Blaming things on biology solely, not, again, very clear, we're not removing the biological impact, but considering things to be only biological is one of those maladaptive solution things. It leads people down the road of doing more and more and more exploration and experimentation and control over what things they are putting into their body, or, you know, how much sleep they're getting, just purely physical management, which is great. Not to only do that, but getting more sleep helps with a lot of things if you're not getting enough sleep, and drinking enough water helps with a lot of things, and eating a balanced diet helps with a lot of things, and so on. But if you only look at that to the exclusion of all else, then you miss things. Other things that you could change. Maybe you could change even more easily, or think of it like this. If you get punched in the eye and you get a black eye, is that a biological process? Absolutely. The trauma of force striking that portion, you know, and the breaking blood vessels that release blood, and the blood colors, and that's what gives it is absolutely a biological process that has nothing to do with why you got hit, or how to protect yourself or change things so that you don't get hit again. So sometimes we confuse biological processes with they are not a response to a stimuli, that it's just a thing that's happening for no reason whatsoever. I mean, it's generally not true. Generally not true. We wouldn't want someone who is repeatedly getting punched in the face by their next door neighbor to focus in on, this black eye is a problem because my blood vessels keep breaking. I got to do something to strengthen those blood vessels so they stop breaking so much, while still allowing themselves to get punched in the face by their neighbor every other day. We want to address the most efficient way to resolve things. And just to be clear, people go the other direction too, where they make everything about circumstances and, you know, systems and situations and things external to them, and ignore biology and internal responses to things as well. All of it matters. Depending on the specific thing that you're struggling with, you'll want to look at different specific ways of addressing that thing. Very long way to get to the point on seasonal depression of, if you have seasonal depression, open up your evaluation of what's going on beyond just the biological. Don't ignore the biological. And I suppose I'm coming at this from the idea that I'm talking to someone who is more focused on it as a biological issue than an emotional or cognitive issue. Then, you know, I could have assumed some people are going to say, no, I just got to tough it out, and spent most of this time focusing on, hey, look at the biology as well. I don't know why that's the thought that I had, the impulse that I had. But just look at all elements of it. Is school causing you problems? Is the way in which you interact with your academic environment or your occupational environment, is it inherently unsustainable? And just so that you know, if you're going to school in this country, especially past, I'd say, grade 6 or so, it is unsustainable. It is designed to be unsustainable. It's designed to make things worse and worse and worse over time, and then get a big break to recover, and then come back and make things worse and worse. And I don't mean that in like some nefarious group of people somewhere is like, how do we torture people? I mean that what we're talking about is things like rigor and competition. If this is the amount of time that we have to be able to teach somebody, and what we're teaching them is going to be impactful for them, even if it's just because of the grade that they get is impactful for them. Well, then within that time, I want to do as much as I can do. Well, what does that mean? That means that I am not making it sustainable. I'm making it sustainable in the sense that they can get through that period of time. But the second day will be worse than the first. And if the final day was just as easy to get through as the first day, then I am not getting as much as I can out of that period of time. If I can rely on there being a break afterwards, I can get more, go into debt, energy debt, physical debt, whatever, that person's body will have to then pay back. This is a huge part of the reason that school is hard for so many people, but especially harder the less resources you have, because it's designed around the idea that on these breaks, you will have a very restful period of recovery. If that's not the case, then you can't do the pattern that they're expecting people to be able to do. Start off real strong, have a lot of access to energy and other resources, be very, like, let's say, motivated or whatever. And it gets harder, and there's the grind, and it gets boring, but you're looking forward to Thanksgiving break. Oh, there's Thanksgiving break, and then it's harder and depressing, but now you're looking forward to Christmas break, and then Christmas break, and then if you don't get to recover on those breaks, then you just won't be able to do as much as those people are doing, because you have no room to give. You're just starting here and staying here, and on the break, you maybe get up a little bit or maybe not. Sometimes the break actually makes it even worse. Seasonal depression affects people even in climates where there isn't a significant change between, or isn't as significant of a change as I experience, or those of us who have like snowy winters and hot summers experience, because of patterns like that. Because what you're doing is unsustainable until you hit a break. So look around at your life and see if that's the case. And if, like many people right now at the beginning, I guess middle of September, you're already very focused on how am I going to get through this winter, that's a good sign that whatever you have done in the past and or whatever your projections about what this winter will be like is barely survivable, very much not sustainable. If you're thinking about it now, is because you either have experiences or have reason to believe that this upcoming experience will be one of getting through by the skin of your teeth. Sometimes you have options, opportunities, choice, control to be able to make changes there. Sometimes not very much at all. Even if you can't change what it is that you are being asked to do, you're going to have to perform to the same level. Look at anything beyond that is optional. Even if you think it's good, look at whether it's something that can be dropped temporarily, or look at other things that have helped you to rest and recover, or make it through days more easily, make it through weeks more easily, and look at whether you can up the ways in which you engage, increase your engagement and interaction with those things. That this cycle is a natural thing, not the cycle of specifically, the school year is hard and then summer's a nice big break. But the idea that we move in cycles is an inherent and natural thing. We wake, we sleep. We just want to make those comfortable as much as possible. That whatever part of the cycle you're in is as enjoyable and sustainable as it can be before you get to the next part. Just look at it in that sense. Do you need to take a break? As opposed to treating personal days or mental health days or whatever as a kind of emergency reaction. Oh, things are real bad, I can't go to school today. You can look at building that in. I know that beginning of October, the last 3 years has been a real rough time for me. Why don't I just plan on taking a few days off in the middle there? Whereas, May is easy because I'm so excited about the end of the school year or upcoming summer or whatever. So I don't need to save my personal days for that far in advance. Experiment. And socialization is definitely a pattern here, especially in places where the weather does change and the light does change quite a bit in the winter. There's often a pattern of meeting people, having big, fun, like outgoing, interactive experiences, which is not fun for everybody, but if it is fun for you, having those experiences over the summer, and then winter is very closed up. When I first moved to Chicago, I read an article on how to meet people in Chicago, and it said, summer, go out in the summer, go to the bars, go to events, meet people in the summer, because when winter hits, everybody's just hanging out at their house or their friends' houses. You don't meet people in the winter. I got to get wrapping up, but what are some other cycles that might come along with the season? There's the important anniversaries. There might be, especially in America, holidays, New Year. New Year is a symbolic time. It brings a lot of things up for a lot of people. What have I accomplished in the last year? What am I intending to accomplish in the upcoming year? Where am I going? What am I doing? Christmas brings things up for people. I am sure all kinds of holidays and special events and birthdays and whatever bring things up for people. Just pay attention to that. Illness increases in the fall and the winter. Look at doing the things that you can do to shore up your physical health and your immune system, and etc. I don't know. I got to wrap up. I'm sure there are a million other things. Thank you all for being here. I will be here next Wednesday, same time, 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Central Time. Thank you. Bye.